You don't even like sports.
Welcome to You Don't Even Like Sports, a podcast about sports, for people who don't like sports. With your hosts, Adam Todd Brown, and Jeff May.
Hey Adam.
What?
You don't even like sports.
You don't even like sports.
You don't even like sports.
Hey everybody, welcome to You Don't Even Like Sports.
You don't even like sports.
It's a podcast about sports for people who don't like sports.
Like you.
We're especially in the You Don't Like Sports wheelhouse today because we're talking about wrestling.
This, I think, is going to be the most awaited episode to date of this show.
Yeah, I could see that because we're talking about Dennis Rodman's time as a wrestler.
Well, he was a wrestler. Karl Malone's time was a wrestler.
True. The last thing we talked about was Dennis Rodman's time with the Chicago Bulls. And as everyone who's watching the Last Dance documentary now knows, that Bulls team effectively disbanded in 1998. And that's when Dennis Rodman really becomes Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, I mean, he's really coming out to play.
Like, even his last couple seasons in the NBA, he is aggressively Dennis Rodman.
To the point where, like, this is one of those situations where all the tumblers have landed exactly for the lock to unlock to get peak Rodman. Like, peak Rodman is 1998.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Peak Rodman is joining the NWO.
In the midst of the NBA Finals.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where nothing could be more indicative of his life and career than him smoking cigars during wrestling promos when he's supposed to be filmed during workouts and shit.
We talked a little bit on the last episode about how that 98 team disbanded. And we've talked a bunch of times on this podcast about what happens to Dennis Rodman when he's in a situation that feels like a family and then it breaks up. And that's what happened with the Bulls.
Pearl Jam has to come in and save the day. And that was during the Yield era. You don't want Yield Pearl Jam. You don't want to sit in a car with a shotgun next to you listening to Do the Evolution.
That's actually the one song I like from that album.
It's a great song. Yeah, I actually really like that song. It's the only one I know from that.
Yeah, same. They wrote a song about Dennis Rodman in 1996 called Black, Red, and Yellow, I believe.
Really?
It is the B-side to Hail Hail.
Ooh, now I know why I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I don't know shit about this era of Pearl Jam at all. I was a Nirvana guy.
It's a B-side to a B-side, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much. So after he leaves the Bulls, he does sort of plays 2 more seasons in the NBA.
I mean, sure. Like, he is technically contracted in the NBA. I don't know if I'd say he played 2 seasons, but...
Yeah, I remember when he went to the Lakers, I was like, oh shit, Dennis Rodman could have another run. The Lakers are a solid franchise.
They were the last ditch effort for ring run people.
Yeah.
That was your Gary Paytons and your Karl Malones. Everyone runs to the Lakers for a shot. It's like going to the Patriots right before you retire.
Was it the Celtics that beat Malone and the Lakers that year, or the Pistons?
The Celtics beat them in 2008.
So that probably was not the Malone
Yeah, then it would have been the Pistons in 2005, 2004.
Thank you so much, Detroit Pistons. Oh, man.
Yeah.
I would have been fine with Gary Payton winning a championship, but not as fine as I am with Karl Malone never winning a championship.
Exactly. Gary Payton's likable, and his head looks like a little peanut, which I really like.
He's got the cutest head in the NBA.
Right? It's adorable. He looks like a little shaved animal. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cute. Karl Malone, on the other hand, is a monster. Although, as we're going to talk about, Karl Malone's a fucking monster.
Holy shit. I did not realize that man is a fucking truck.
Dude, he showed up, and I was just like, he looks like a fucking superhero.
He was the scariest person in that ring.
Yeah, he's the last person I would want to run into in that ring, yeah.
Yeah, I would fight Diamond Dallas Page before I'd fight Karl Malone.
Yeah, I also would go through that process. It's funny too, yeah, because he played 2 seasons. He did the Lakers for 98-99, right?
Yeah, he played 23 games with the Lakers. I remember there was a really famous incident where I think it was with the Lakers where he got called for a foul and just sat down at the free throw line. And that turned into a big deal and he was like out of town.
That's pretty cool though.
Yeah, it is. It's quintessential Dennis Rodman.
Yeah, like if you hire Dennis Rodman to do a thing for your team, part of that thing is going to be, oh, I just be Dennis Rodman on the court. I just fuck around every once in a while.
Right.
Like him taking a seat during that shot, like sold some jerseys.
Oh, 100%. I would wear a Rodman Lakers jersey.
It's the only jersey I would wear. I would wear that, or I would wear a 23 I think I sent this to you, right? Where I had the idea of making a 23 jersey that says Jordan on the back, but it's a Lakers jersey.
Yeah.
Oh, that would just be like the ultimate troll.
So his next season, though, with the Dallas Mavericks, I would argue this is peak Dennis Rodman in the NBA. This is Dennis Rodman at the apex.
Yeah, this is the most Dennis Rodman you can have Dennis Rodman be.
It's like Dennis Rodman concentrate. Like if you pour water on it, it'll be a whole season.
Yeah, you just 2 drops of Rodman into the bucket. Anything more, you got to dilute it. Yeah.
Over the course of 12 games he played with the Mavericks that year, he received 6 technical fouls, was ejected twice, and served a 1-game suspension, but also averaged 14.3 rebounds per game, which was better than his career average.
This is like an ad for cocaine. Like this specific... These stats are 100% an ad for cocaine. It's just like, do better than you've ever done, be super disrespectful, and burn out real fast.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. He lasted 12 games, and they were like, all right, fuck this. You are out of here.
Was that Cuban era? Was this right before Cuban, or was this during Cuban?
Cuban's owned them for a while, hasn't he?
He bought them, what was it, when it was the Yahoo Sports thing, right? That made him all his money? Like he sold a sports thing to Yahoo to make his billions, like pre.com burst.
Yeah.
And I know he showed up in like the late 90s or early 2000s, and that's when the Mavericks were like, oh, let's be good. Let's be good at basketball.
He bought them in 2000.
So it was during this era.
How much do you think he paid for them?
$232 million.
Very close. $280 million.
Really? I don't even know what the going price is for a Dallas Maverick, but I'm down with it. He revamped the shit out of them.
They won a championship eventually. I think kind of recently.
They became the new Spurs, essentially. They were fundamentally sound. It's just that they actually made their games interesting to go to. It was like a goddamn carnival when you went to the Mavericks games.
Yeah. And they had
that's after this clown Rodman was there. Ho!
Oh, hey. So yeah, by this point, the NBA was done with Dennis Rodman.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, like no one cares about this. Like we're like, and here's some stats. And everyone's like, get to the fake fighting.
One example of how out of control Rodman was in those final years of his career comes during the 98 NBA Finals, when prior to Game 4, Dennis Rodman is supposed to be attending a shoot-around that the NBA is going to film for like promotional shit. And he's not there. And only a select handful of players, along with Phil Jackson, know where Dennis Rodman is. As it turns out,
although it turns out millions of people actually know where he is.
Millions of people do find out very quickly that he had flown to Auburn Hills, Michigan to film a promo for the WCW's Monday Nitro, announcing he'd be wrestling his on-court rival Utah Jazz power forward Karl Malone.
Was that during that promo was when they did announce it? Yeah. Because I was, I thought they officially announced it on fucking Leno.
Well, yeah, they might. I think he like called him out.
Yeah, I think Hogan calls him out. Like Hogan basically is like, I love watching you throw around Karl Malone, brother. And we know why Hulk Hogan likes watching someone throw around Karl Malone.
Absolutely.
We have video that explains why he likes that.
Yeah, Hulk Hogan goes on to look like he's having a lot of fun choking Karl Malone. What's that all about?
To be fair, how much fun would you have choking Karl Malone?
I would love it. I would probably sprain my hand, but I would still love it.
That's my Make-A-Wish. Just give me 3 to 6 minutes of choking Karl Malone, please. The unfortunate thing is if your Make-A-Wish is when you have AIDS, he won't let you do it.
Call back.
Because it's funny too, because now this is my fucking wheelhouse right now. Did you watch wrestling in the late 90s during the Attitude Era?
No.
The Monday Night Wars? See, I did. And this was, even when you're watching it, you're like, oh, so he joins up with the NWO. He had previously joined up the year before for a bash at the beach. And the NWO, this was the sort of like not even the anti-heroes, but the popular villains. This was the era where like the anti-establishment, we're going to break the rules, we're bad guys, we're going to swear, showed up, taking Hulk Hogan, making him a heel, Hulk Hogan, who was the ultimate, babyface his entire career, and turning him into a heel. And it was perfect for Dennis Rodman. It's like they created that in order to put Dennis Rodman in there.
For people who don't follow wrestling, explain what a heel is.
Okay. So I said babyface and a heel. A face is the good guys, and a heel is the bad guys. And a babyface is like a permanent good guy. A babyface is like the absolute top. The example that we give now is John Cena.
Sure.
These people that, they are very popular. They sell a lot of T-shirts. They're like always going to win. They're Superman, essentially.
Right.
And then at that time, in the late 90s, wrestling was sort of run by sort of the anti-heroes, even so much towards the villains, where you had like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, who was like, Stone Cold was like the beer-swilling blue-collar asshole, and The Rock was like the cocky corporate scumbag. The WWE's version of the NWO was D-Generation X, which was Shawn Michaels and Triple H and X-Pac, and who had shipped. It was like a whole ass thing, man. But the NWO they were the bad guys. They were the villains. They got a lot of good heat, but they were the bad guys.
Yeah, what it was essentially was Hulk Hogan going through that thing that so many things went through in the 90s, where they got kind of like an edgy reboot when everything was extreme. Like that's when the NFL started changing all their uniforms and shit like that. And yeah, so Hulk Hogan basically becomes a bad guy.
Yeah. And there are people that sort of exist at that time, and we're going to revisit, like the main sort of face of WCW at the time was Diamond Dallas Page.
Right. And Diamond Dallas Page is kind of the reason this all happens.
He's the linchpin that's going to hold. He's like the secret ingredient, so to speak.
Right. Because he meets Karl Malone at like an autograph signing thing in Houston.
Sort of, yeah. So he meets somebody at a signing in Houston that's like, hey, man, you want to come to the Rockets? Want to come to a Rockets game? And he's like, yeah, of course I do. Who are they playing? He's like, the Jazz. He's like, oh, my God, I'd love to see Karl Malone play. Or at least that's how he puts it now.
Right.
I think he was more of a Stockton guy, if I can be honest. But watching Stockton go into the wrestling ring would have been fantastic.
I would have loved if Stockton was there for all this.
Put him in a little mask.
Tossing Karl Malone chairs.
Yeah. Just like real no look chair tossing. But yeah, and that's when he goes to the game and he meets Malone. They have like a meet cute.
They really do.
Because they're in this, like, he's about 20 rows back watching the game, and it's like a little downtime, and Karl Malone like catches his eye and does the diamond cutter thing, which was essentially a hand pussy, and you like throw it down to your crotch and it breaks open when you throw it down. That's literally what it was. So you'd make the hand pussy motion and then you'd throw it down. And he's like, oh my God, he knows my thing. And then he does it again. And so then Malone basically sends somebody to be like, hey, get him backstage passes and we're going to bring him inside.
Yeah. And that turns into a sort of a friendship. And the idea is floated that maybe Karl Malone might want to do some wrestling. And as it turns out, Karl Malone really wanted to do some wrestling.
That's the only thing Karl Malone really wanted to do.
Yeah. Aside from like busting speeders on the highway, Karl Malone had no other dreams in life than wrestling.
Yeah. He said he wanted to be a cop. He's like, all my life I always wanted to be a cop, fly jets, and I wanted to wrestle. And it's like, man, I feel like 2 of those would be very easy for you to do like now.
Yeah. And he goes, I'm never going to do 2 of those. And it's like, you The police would take you. The police would 100%. For PR reasons alone, the police would take you. And flying a jet, just go buy one.
Yeah, I don't think he'll fit in a jet. That's the problem with that. You have to be like 5'11" or shorter, I think, to fly a jet.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. Like, I can't go to space. What the fuck is that about?
Yeah, I love this idea that Karl Malone just like reluctantly fell into being one of the best basketball players of all time.
Guess I'll just be the one thing out of these three options that makes me a millionaire.
God, I hated Karl Malone so much.
You can still hate him.
Except watching this, like, did you watch this match?
Yes.
It's the only time in my life I've ever been happy for Karl Malone.
This was his Make-A-Wish.
It really is.
His Make-A-Wish was to get choked by Hulk Hogan.
And it came true.
It is funny because when you go into this, you roll into this like, oh, this is a thing that Dennis Rodman did. And it does seem like Karl Malone sort of really steals the thunder here because he is definitely the highlight of this process.
Oh, 100%. Like, he really takes to it. And it turns out it was kind of like, I always assumed this came from the Rodman camp, the idea to do this, because Rodman had already been wrestling. But it's actually Diamond Dallas Page and Karl Malone who pitched this idea to Eric Bischoff, who is at the time president of WCW.
Yeah. So he was the president of WCW, and he was also the figurehead of the NWO. So he himself was a heel, much the way Vince McMahon was doing the same and has continued to do throughout the WWE. Now, this is very funny here because one of the things that can't be ignored about this system is just how much of sort of like even though the wrestling was at the peak of its popularity and it will never reach this again. Like, wrestling will never be as popular as it was in 1998. But the fact that there was still this sort of carnival barker, it's almost like a P.T. Barnum level of maneuvering that Eric Bischoff is doing here, where he's like, look at all the mainstream attention we're about to get. And so you can see him, it is this very sort of like hucksterish version of the process where he's like, oh, we can do some stuff at the NBA finals even. And if you guys want to talk trash on each other during interviews, you totally should. But like, think about the eyes that are going on to WCW from this, because this thing is promoted essentially during the finals.
Yeah. They mention it on one of the broadcasts.
Yeah. And including the day after the finals, because the day after the finals, Rodman was scheduled to go on Leno. Win or lose. That was his and that's where the culmination of that was, where DDP and Karl Malone both showed up.
Right. They showed up on the Tonight Show, and that's sort of where the announcement happened. But they also they fight, but it's a wrestling fight.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I think they said that somebody gets clocked for real in that.
I think it was Dennis Rodman.
Dennis Rodman got hit by DDP or vice versa or something. And this goes back to also Leno having a good relationship with WCW as well. He himself has gotten into the ring, and it's very not good. It's not good.
Oh, really?
Can you believe it?
Yeah. What a shock.
He doesn't even do a chin move.
The timing of this is insane, and that the NBA even allowed it to happen.
I agree with you. And one of the things that I really held on to during this whole process was the idea that there had to be, because everybody knew at the time that wrestling was fixed, that this also casts massive shade over the NBA finals. Like, nobody thinks about that, but a lot of people are going to look at this being like, well, how do they not hate each other? Do they actually hate each other? Because we know that wrestling is a work, so maybe the NBA finals are also a work. There's going to be a microscope on the NBA because of this. And that's something that's not even really addressed.
Yeah, there had to be something in it for the NBA for them to allow this to happen during the NBA finals, like the heart of the fucking NBA finals. All of a sudden, two of the biggest figures in that NBA finals are off focusing on WCW Monday Nitro.
Yeah, man. It's the same reason that WCW wanted it. Fucking looks, man. Like, how many fucking, how many neckbeards were watching the NBA finals before this?
I wonder if some of it was they knew that Bulls team was coming to an end, and they were going to lose some viewers over that.
They sure were. But even beyond that, too, like these demographics do not overlap as much as you'd think.
No.
Like the NBA, you know, when you look at the fandom and you look at the wrestling fandom, they are, you know, wrestling tends to be a, you know, you hate to generalize, but a sort of white and, you know, not the same anymore, but it was generally white and WCW historically Southern, you know, like, so a lot of the people that stuck with WCW were, you know, of that demographic. So that, like, who's watching Chicago versus Utah when you're from Arkansas?
Right.
Like, how many people are actually watching that? Except now the two headliners for Bash at the Beach are competing in a legitimate sporting event. Like the amount of views that are going to be hitting the NBA finals, it's going to spike.
Yeah. And I think where the crossover, at least for basketball fans, would come is there was a legitimate rivalry between Rodman and Malone. They played in the NBA finals the year before, and Rodman never throughout his career did he ever stop doing that thing where if he was guarding you, he was going to try and beat you. Like, not win the game. Like, he was going to try and fucking hurt you.
Yeah, diamond cutter.
He used to beat the shit out of Karl Malone. Like,
yeah,
that's the kind of player Dennis Rodman was, and it helped keep Karl Malone from winning a championship.
It's also funny because in real life, Karl Malone would murder Dennis Rodman.
Karl Malone would murder most people in real life.
I can't get over. Like, and also, I kind of want to feel like if I was in the NBA watching Karl Malone at Bash at the Beach, I'd be like, why the fuck weren't you looking like that during the game? Because he gets jacked up for this.
Yeah.
fight.
I feel like I always pictured Karl Malone as kind of tall and lanky.
Most NBA players, yeah.
He whips his shirt off at this wrestling match, and my God, he's the biggest fucking person there. Like, not just tallest, he's obviously the tallest, but he's also like the most in shape person at this event.
I feel like in the NBA, flexibility and leg strength are pretty paramount, you know? That the like sizable and muscular NBA star, we're still a ways away from that. You know, like Dwight Howard is really the one that I think of when I think of like the massive, like the strong and muscular, like almost bodybuilding look. I mean, there's always been guys like Shaq and stuff like that, but dominance isn't necessarily predicated on big arms and big shoulders. I mean, density is sure, but you know, and then Karl Malone shows up and you're like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's insane. I encourage people. Here's the thing. You can get, if you're really, really interested in seeing this match, you can do what Jeff and I did and sign up for a 30-day free trial of the WWE Network and watch that shit and then just immediately cancel it. You won't pay a dime.
Watch Bash at the Beach 97 as a little teaser. And then if you type in Dennis Rodman, I believe you can also get all the NWO promos that they did as well.
Yeah, if you just search Dennis Rodman, you actually have to scroll way down to find it. But there's a whole documentary about this match with Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone. And it's pretty interesting.
Karl Malone is the hero of this story.
Oh,
for the
100%.
First and last time.
They talk about the difference between Malone and Rodman when it came to preparing for this. And the difference is that one of them prepared for this.
It seems to me, because like Hogan and Rodman were like together and you know, DDP and Karl Malone were together. And the way they put it is the focus is that Karl Malone worked hard and Dennis Rodman was a natural. And so working hard is going to kind of always trump just being good at something to start with and then resting on it.
Right.
So you look at these matches and there's a lot of arm drag takedowns on the part of Dennis Rodman because it's a generally simple thing to do. A lot of hip tosses, body slams, nothing that's really complicated. And Karl Malone just lifts weights during the fight.
It kind of reminds me of comedy in a couple ways. One, the thing you just said, we've talked about it a bunch of times. People will show up in LA and be like, hey, I got talent, recognize me. And it's like, no, you actually have to work also. Like, everyone here is talented. So you need to do a little more. And also, the WCW was very resentful of Dennis Rodman showing up, having no experience, and just immediately being an attraction.
Yeah, wrestling is like that. In general, wrestling is like that.
So is comedy.
Yep.
Like, any actor can knock most comics off stage at the Comedy Store on any given night if they just show up and say they want to tell jokes.
Yeah, a lot of Piven tickets being sold.
Right. So there was a lot of that toward Dennis Rodman when he got there, and it didn't help that he also didn't put a ton of work into it. But you hear the same thing here that you do when people talk about basketball. Like when he showed up, he actually was into it. But he was into, it seemed more like the promo stuff, like inside the ring, not so much.
Yeah, he was, to put it specifically, he was about that life. There's a lot of stuff about him, like the amount of video of, like, there's more video of him smoking cigars than not during, like, there's a lot of cigar smoking, like almost an egregious, like, I was like, is this sponsored by the concept of cigars? But like, he's going through this, he's like, I want a tour bus. I want a bus.
Yeah.
And they get him a tour bus for a week.
Yeah, I could see him wanting a tour bus if it, well, I guess for just a week, maybe that's reasonable if he's going to be doing a lot of traveling. But he would also take that tour bus to like strip clubs and shit.
Oh, there's a whole story about how he basically he took a bunch of wrestlers and Eric Bischoff he was like, after they were done with a taping or something, he's like, I want to go to a strip club. And they were like, what? And he's like, yeah, let's go. And like, I think a lot of the wrestlers were like, yeah, we live hard, but not like this hard. He disappears onto the bus and just is fucking.
Just sport fucking in that bus.
Yeah. Like, I love the idea that like when wrestlers are, because like wrestlers are like historically famous for being kind of unstable and, you know, kind of sleazy. And then they meet Dennis Rodman and they're like, Jesus, this guy's gross.
I would love to meet Dennis Rodman. I would like 100%. to hang out with Dennis Rodman for like 3 days.
That's a monkey's paw wish. I would like to hang out with Dennis Rodman for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Unless I'm writing an article about him, then give me 3 days. But if it's just like a meet and greet hangout kind of thing, give me no more than 3 hours.
Yeah, it would be fucking intense.
I don't have the energy that's what he's a pro at, fucking living.
Yeah, seems to be a pro at not sleeping.
Yeah, like he literally, there are times when he's like, yeah, and then I would do this and sleep for like 3 hours and then come up and then go play a game and get, 17 rebounds. And it's like, man, imagine if you had like a people life and still was in the, like, imagine if you worked like Karl Malone.
Yeah, in this setting, Karl Malone's work ethic really shines compared to Rodman, because during all of this, while Rodman's off fucking around in his tour bus, Karl Malone is fucking working out and practicing.
The Nautilus machines, yeah.
Yeah, he shows up to this thing fucking prepared. Like
post NBA Finals, he doesn't leave the gym. Like he gets, because like he's, NBA players, and we kind of recently discussed it, they're like in great shape because you have to be, because somebody like Karl Malone is playing 44 minutes a game. Like, so you have to be in the most intense physical shape. But now you're adding muscle to that. Like, it's going to come quick.
Yeah. This whole thing reminds me of like, I don't know, there was a debate in 2004, the first debate with John Kerry and George W. Bush. And George W. Bush was such a fucking clown. Everyone assumed he was just going to get massacred in this debate. And he didn't. Like, he looked really good against John Kerry. And this feels like the same thing where you hear Karl Malone, Dennis Rodman are about to wrestle. Who do you put your money on being the most interesting person in that equation? It's going to be Dennis Rodman, because Karl Malone is historically boring.
Yeah.
And then he shows up and he is the most engaging person in this match by far.
It's a perfect storm too, because Karl Malone is a perennial underdog. Like, Karl Malone has always been the guy who almost got it, So like in that regard, like, it makes sense, because DDP was essentially the underdog of the WCW because he was the one guy that was trying to stay true when everybody else was going bad.
Yeah, and I love how this match almost perfectly mirrors how the 98 NBA Finals ended also. Because if you remember, that was the shot. That was Jordan's game-winning shot that wins the NBA Finals. And it was also a very clear and egregious offensive foul that was not called.
Yeah. Also, Malone threw a diamond cutter on Jordan coming down.
Yeah, people just completely gloss over that part because the Bulls won.
That was an and one.
Yeah.
He just took a hard diamond cutter to the parquet floor.
And yeah, the 98 finals kind of end with the Bulls sort of like lightweight cheating and winning that game. And this match ends with Karl Malone kind of getting cheated out of winning. So I love that fucking turn, but we'll get to it.
Yeah. So we'll jump quickly. Last year, Rodman had joined the NWO, and he and Hogan tagged up against Lex Luger and the Giant. At the time, he was being sort of like shadow pushed as the son of Andre the Giant because he was just a massive dude. He wore the same black singlet that Andre made famous in WrestleMania 3. Nowadays, we know him as The Big Show. You may have somehow surprisingly found out that he now has a sitcom on Netflix.
What?
Yep, just was cruising around Netflix, and all of a sudden, it's like him and his daughters. You know, he's got like a bunch of little daughters.
I did not know that.
Neither did I. It just came, like, I had not heard of it, and it just showed up.
That's amazing.
So Hogan and Rodman, they lost that match. Lex Luger, historical babyface, he was the total package. He was like this ripped dude. If you see Lex Luger now, you're like, what the fuck? He looks like 140 pounds.
Yeah, it's rough.
Have you seen him now?
A few years ago, there was a picture of him circulating.
Yeah, he looks like a old man at a retirement home. This is like a hard fucking life, man.
Yeah, it really is.
Wrestlers don't rebound well.
Yeah, Diamond Dallas Page seems to be doing all right. Guy's running a yoga studio now.
Well, DDP Yoga is, I think it's one of the most popular at-home workout programs in the world because look who he appeals to, and it saved Jake the Snake Roberts' life. Did you watch that documentary?
No.
You need to, like, the resurrection of Jake the Snake Roberts. It's so fucking good.
I will check that out.
If you want to watch out a fucking addiction documentary that sort of works towards saving the life of somebody, DDP plays a massive role in that. DDP seems like a good dude, in spite of the fact that he cut me in line for the breakfast buffet at Chicago in like 2010.
Well, that's some bullshit.
Yeah, him and Jake the Snake Roberts, they cut me in line during C2E2, during a Comic-Con. And he was like, oh, we're pretty hungry. And I was like, yeah, we're all hungry. That's why we're in line.
Yeah, the last I saw Diamond Dallas Page was this week on CNN because his yoga studios are based in Georgia, and Georgia is reopening the country for bars and gyms and shit. And he was like, I'm not reopening. Crazy? So good for him.
Yeah, I think he gets most of his money through the internet, which is also good for him too.
Yeah.
Like that program, I know a lot of people that use that program, and it's supposedly very good, especially, you know, it's good to ease people in when they have joint problems. If you looking into getting into exercise, I wouldn't not suggest it. He seems like a good dude. Diamond Dallas Page just like, seems like a generally good dude, and he knew what was good for wrestling. Like Malone was like, oh, I've always wanted to wrestle, and DDP's like, oh shit, Rodman's coming in here. Like, would you want to do that? And Malone's like, are you shitting me? Fucking yes. And they had to convince Eric Bischoff of doing it. Bischoff did not. At first, he wasn't stoked on it until Karl Malone pushed the Lakers' dicks in the dirt during the conference finals in 98. Anyway, so 97, they had that fight. Hogan and Rodman lost that match, but that really sort of cements Dennis Rodman's relationship with professional wrestling, which is kind of the most natural progression there ever could have been for him.
Yeah, 100%. It's still a sport that requires you to be in shape, and there's a competitive aspect to it, but it also really, really plays to the type of personality Dennis Rodman is, because even like the example they use in the WWE documentary is Gorgeous George, who was a wrestler in the fucking 50s, who came in the ring dressed like Liberace. He had women spraying perfume behind him.
Yeah.
It was a whole thing.
He was drawing homophobic heat, you know? He was the natural villain just because he was like, maybe I'm a gay guy. Which, by the way, translated in the 90s with the Goldust character. Goldust was considered a villain, and like the main thing that his push was yeah, I might be a gay guy. That was like the whole thing. He feuded with Roddy Piper, and the big problem was that Roddy Piper, the hero, was a massive homophobe. That's legitimately like they had like a great, I think it was WrestleMania, but it was like a street fight where I think someone was hit by a car, and the whole thing was perceived on homophobia.
Yeah, it's crazy to go back in take in any kind of 90s media, and unless you're talking about like grunge albums or Dennis Rodman interviews, it's just homophobic as fuck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, so much comedy around then was just built on, oh, that's pretty gay. That thing you're doing, it's gay.
Yeah. 30% of all Friends episodes are like a gay joke.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
Or like they introduce a gay guy and it's like, he's fine. That's the whole bit.
Yeah. So it makes sense that Dennis Rodman ends up in wrestling.
Yeah. It was tailor-made for him. Like him joining wrestling means he wouldn't have been the first dude to show up in public in a wedding dress.
Right. Exactly.
Like all the shit he's done was done as a wrestling gimmick 8 years before he was around.
Yeah. So they get to this match. Let's talk about the match. The 1998 Bash at the Beach, which again, WWE Network, you can go watch it for free if you want. Everything about this match is aggressively 90s. The music they come out to, the shit they're wearing, the fucking audience.
So at the time, Diamond Dallas Page's entrance music was essentially a rip off of Smells Like Teen Spirit, which is so funny because if anybody's a big Nirvana fan and that song starts playing, you just go self high five, which is the thing that he would say over it. And then the NWO came out to fucking Jimi Hendrix, like a Jimi Hendrix reboot.
Yeah.
And it would just like new world order. And it would just, they would have like the guys doing like voice vignettes over the music. It is 100% of its time.
It's extreme, just like everything in the 90s. I love the notion. One weird characteristic of this match, Dennis Rodman keeps his shirt on the entire time. And it's been suggested that he was supposed to tear his shirt off just like Hulk Hogan tore his off, but he didn't want to be shirtless next to Karl Malone, and I totally understand.
I would not want to be shirtless next to Karl Malone.
And what's crazy about that is Dennis Rodman is fucking cut, like all the time, even when he's at his worst. He's fucking ripped.
Yeah, he's but you know, there's something about having a lack of bulk. You know, you got to remember, like, wrestling is a very bulky, it's not necessarily, you know, it's for show. So like lean muscle, it's not the same. It's not like UFC where there's a practicality in lean muscle in true fighting, but in wrestling it's a spectacle, and you know, these men should look like circus strongmen or superheroes. That's, you know, it's what you want in your boy soap opera.
Yeah, Malone in this though, like normally I see a wrestler body and I'm like, that guy's fucking taking steroids or something. Malone took his shirt off and I was like, that guy's been dragging fucking logs through the woods for 90 days.
Yeah, he had a Rocky IV body.
He sure did.
Like he's like insane. It's almost to the point where like if I saw that for the first time, I'd be like, Jesus. Like if I'm Hogan and I'm like, oh man, this is a problem. I don't want to fight this guy.
He looks like a wrestler who happened to be good at basketball instead of the other way around.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. So, and then Rodman kind of is like, nah, I didn't care about that. I just wanted to sell more shirts. So I left my shirt on. Because he had this dope Rodzilla NWO shirt.
Which we have since ordered Rodzilla shirts.
Of course we have.
Who knows when they'll arrive.
So it starts with Rodman and Malone first, because of course it does. That's what you want. You want that image to be the first thing. You want to keep people there. Rodman
is wearing huge hoop earrings during this match, which feels precarious to me.
Oh, 100%. That would be... That probably, if one of those earrings got ripped out of his ears during that, it probably wouldn't have even been the worst injury of the night.
I was expecting it to happen. I'm surprised it didn't.
He does that classic heel move where he keeps like avoiding and taunting Karl Malone, really building it up, you know?
Yeah, he runs from Karl Malone a bunch to start, and then Hollywood Hogan gets tagged in next. Karl Malone immediately puts him in a headlock.
That's why Hogan said the N-word later.
He said it then too.
Yeah, that's why the headlock happened. That was real.
And then Karl Malone body slams him, and the ease with which he picks up Hulk Hogan and lifts him over his head is a sight to behold.
It's like body slamming a toddler. Like Hulk Hogan is probably, I'm guessing, around 260 pounds of solid muscle and gravy skin at the time. And Malone because even they talk about it, and like Rodman's like, oh, Malone was like 275 pounds of pure muscle. And he's like, and I'm like 220.
Yeah.
Like Malone, for somebody his size, does not weigh a lot. He was very kind of stringy in that regard, like cut, but stringy. And he's like, no, man, Malone is jacked. And
he looks like he's throwing a slightly heavier basketball.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's like he picked up a loaf of bread and was like, oh, I didn't mean to pick this up. And he just puts it back down. It's so funny.
So then it becomes Rodman versus Diamond Dallas Page. And this is the point where the crowd starts chanting boring, because it was kind of boring.
Yeah. Rodman, I think, wasn't ready. This is a 22-minute match. This is a long match. And I don't think Rodman was ready for it, because as we're going to find out later, during the interview, he's like, when it was over, I was just like, thank God.
Yeah.
He's like, that payday wasn't worth it.
Yeah, you can tell, although they did, we haven't even mentioned that part, but I think Rodman got $1 million for this and Karl Malone got $900,000. So worth any fines the NBA would have levied for sure.
There's something about this, by the way, when you're watching it where, and I'd never thought about this during the time, but I'm cringing every time one of the NBA guys goes down, because I'm always like, oh, there goes your full-time career. There goes your life. Yeah,
that's another reason I'm surprised the NBA or their respective teams let them do this. Are you familiar with Jason Williams? Not the one who shot his limo driver in Not White Chocolate.
There's a third one?
He's an analyst on ESPN now, but he played for Duke, and he was the number 1 pick coming out of college. He was drafted by the Bulls, and shortly into his first season, got in a motorcycle wreck. And he wasn't wearing a helmet, and his contract stipulated that he could not ride a motorcycle because of risk of injury. And he ends up getting in this motorcycle accident, and it ends his career, and he doesn't get his fucking contract. I'm surprised the teams didn't have some sort of clause where it's like, you can't wrestle during the NBA season. Are you crazy?
I feel like with Malone's like, I signed this contract in 1992. That wasn't even on the fucking table. You can't tell me not to do this.
Yeah.
You know, the Players Association's not weak. You know, if it's not specific, then you're not going to fucking tell them what to do. And, you know, I do sort of get cringy though when I see like there's a scene where fucking Rodman gets like thrown out of the ring and Macho Man comes down to like check on him. And I think it's a real check to be sure he's okay.
Yeah. Rodman did not look like he was enjoying himself during this.
No, the crowd is chanting boring, so he spits at Paige.
Yeah, and that, from the documentary, seems like that was not planned.
No, so Paige spits back at him and goes, all right, now let's go. We're even.
Yeah, and that eventually leads to a really, really fun stretch of this match where Karl Malone gets tagged back in, and it's just like 3 to 4 minutes of Hulk Hogan choking him, and then Dennis Rodman will jump in and drop an elbow on him. And that process just goes back and forth for a few very satisfying minutes.
It's very nice. I'm sure like the NBA was all watching that being like, fucking yeah. Stockton, one tear coming down his eye.
God, I wish Stockton was there.
Yeah, Stockton's there in a little Miss Elizabeth dress.
That would be the best.
Man, that would have been great. Or if like Stockton came and like dressed like Jimmy Mouth of the South Heart with like a little blazer with an airbrushed Karl Malone head on the back.
Yeah, ring manager John Stockton, but still boring as fuck, just dressed really flamboyant.
Yeah, Ric Flair robes.
So the match carries on like that for a little bit, but Malone is really playing up this part where he's struggling to tag Diamond Dallas Page back in. And that's where Malone actually putting the work into this kind of saves this match.
Yeah, the showmanship is out of control for Malone.
Yeah, he's entertaining as fuck.
I was going to say, this is the only time I've ever liked Malone.
Yeah, same.
In an NBA Jam.
Yeah, he's great in NBA Jam.
That's a good team to play as.
But yeah, this is the first time, like I said earlier, that I was genuinely happy for Karl Malone. He looks like he's having so much fun.
Yeah, that seems like real fun.
Yeah, this is a 30-something-year-old man finally living out his boyhood dream in the grandest fucking way possible.
Of being erotically choked by Hulk Hogan.
That's every young boy's dream.
Getting choked out by those 24-inch pythons.
And yeah, meanwhile, Dennis Rodman looks like he's over this shit, like 10 minutes into
texting.
it. Yeah, Malone, like near the end of the match, Malone tags back in and just starts clotheslining everyone. It's very fun to watch. But and then Rodman jumps in and it finally happens. Karl Malone delivers the diamond cutter to Dennis Rodman.
Finally.
After
years of frustration.
Did Diamond Dallas Page do it first to Hulk Hogan?
I think it's Page does it to Hogan, and then Malone does it to Rodman out of like protection, because Rodman's going to go and prevent it. And like Rodman, he's like, man, when he landed that diamond cutter, I was like, thank Christ.
Yeah, because Dennis Rodman's night is over finally.
Yeah. Now I can go back to my regular life of doing this in the street.
But then they get cheated out of the win because the Disciple, that's Randy Macho Man Savage, right?
No, it's Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Randy Savage was just Randy Savage. When the Disciple showed up, he was like fully bearded and like disguised, but it turned out he was Brutus the Barber Beefcake, who had previously, years before, suffered massive damage in a paragliding accident, I believe.
What a dipshit.
No, I think a paraglider hit him in the fucking face and shattered his face.
Jesus.
Yeah, it was a whole ass thing, man.
So he jumps in and gives Diamond Dallas Page a diamond cutter when the ref's not looking. And then Hulk Hogan pins Diamond Dallas Page, and Hogan and Rodman win. Once again, Karl Malone is kept from that elusive championship.
Always diamond cutting the bride, never the diamond cutting bridesmaid, or whatever it is.
And then that turns into a really great sequence where Karl Malone also diamond cutters the ref.
Wait, Karl Malone does? I must have missed that part of the match. Oh, man.
Yeah, after the match ends, Karl Malone is running around the ring protesting, and he's arguing with the ref, and just
a quick heel turn right at the end.
It was pretty great.
I really hope that wasn't in the script. Like, that's just what he wanted to do.
That one was real. Yeah, I feel like this is a better end. Like, Karl Malone should have retired after this.
Yeah, man, that should have been his whole thing. And then he should have gotten into wrestling.
Yeah.
Like watching Malone shift into wrestling would have been so fucking sweet, because he was so meant for it.
Yeah, it was clearly his actual lifetime dream.
And he put in the work. And I got to hand it to you, Karl Malone. You did one thing good.
Yeah. Even the blind squirrel finds a nut sometimes. Good job, Karl Malone. So let's talk about Rodman after this, because this is the point in history where Rodman becomes less of an athlete and more of a media figure.
Yeah, it was previously about 70-30.
Yeah.
And now we're really going to level this off, and then media is going to just really hype up.
Yeah, he did, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, he did stay in the NBA for part of the next 2 seasons. He did try to keep playing basketball. He took a brief hiatus, but then in 2003, he signed with the Long Beach Jam of the newly formed American Basketball Association. The hope was that he'd be called up to the NBA mid-season. That did not happen, but the Jam won the ABA championship that year.
Hey, we should have. Too bad we didn't live there. Too bad we didn't live out here. I would have loved to have seen him play.
Yeah, and over the next few years, we would have had a few more chances, because he also played with Mexico's Fuerza Regia, the Orange County Crush, the Tijuana Dragons, Finland's Torpan Pohat, and the Brighton Bears of the British Basketball League.
Oof, that doesn't seem like a very competitive league.
No. Imagine being in the British Basketball League and fucking Dennis Rodman shows up.
Pass the rock, governor. Or it's me be jamming it, right?
He's 9 feet tall, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, look at the size of him. He's a big Ben, isn't he?
But in 2011, he was inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame.
Rightfully so.
Yeah, his basketball story has a very happy ending. He had an absurdly successful NBA career. Dennis Rodman won 5 NBA championships.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think he was only an All-Star once or twice, which seems crazy, but...
Are you sure?
Yeah.
But maybe that's like the right question of me to ask, because like maybe I'm assuming you asked the same thing when you saw that. Like, really?
Yeah, because I saw it when... Let me find his career stats, because remember I texted you and said Dennis Rodman played in 911 games and that you should make a wish.
Make a wish.
2-time All-NBA team.
So 2-time All-NBA.
Yeah. 2 NBA Defensive Player of the Year awards, 8 All-Defensive Team, 1 NBA Player of the Week award, 1 Player of the Month award, and 1 IBM award. You know what that means.
That he ends up being a hacker?
Yes. So even while he's trying to launch this basketball comeback, he was still just really on the rise as a media personality. He appeared in his first film in 1997, where he won a Golden Raspberry for his performance alongside Jean-Claude Van Damme.
My birthday buddy.
And Mickey Rourke in the film Double Team. You ever seen it?
You know what's funny is I've seen chunks of it and I was like, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I've never seen it. Before all the lockdown stuff started, we were planning on maybe reviewing it for an episode, but watching movies remotely and recording it all is
the amount of work that's going to take.
Yeah. You can all just watch it on your own. In 1999, he starred in Simon Says,
S-E-Z.
a spy action comedy film starring Rodman and comedians Dane Cook and John Panette. Fucking what?
Yeah, that's a real thing that happened.
I did not know Dane Cook is in this movie.
I was going to say, I don't think he was, he wasn't a name. This isn't Good Luck Chuck, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This isn't my best friend's girl.
Yeah, I feel like I wasn't familiar with Dane Cook until like 2002, 2003, something like that.
Yeah.
But I guess it makes sense he was still getting Dennis Rodman movies. This movie had a $10 million budget and grossed $292,000 at the box office.
Whenever I see those numbers, I'm always like, oh, it went to the box office?
Yeah.
Like, instead of being surprised, I'm more surprised that it made money at the box office.
Yeah, this seems like a direct-to-video venture. But who knows? Dennis Rodman was hot at the time. Maybe they thought that was going to translate to movies.
Yet roughly 30,000 people saw that movie in the box office, Adam. Think about that.
That's more people than are going to listen to this podcast.
Hard disagree.
In 2005, Rodman became the first man to appear naked for a PETA campaign.
That tracks.
Same year, he became commissioner of the Lingerie Football League.
That really tracks.
Yeah, 100%. He continued being a fucking champion when he made the switch to reality TV programming. In 2006, he won this is a weird number, the $222,000 grand prize on ABC's Celebrity Mole.
How do you not think he would be the mole at the very beginning?
I looked it up. He apparently wasn't, which means he figured out who the mole was. Which that I can see Dennis Rodman being very good at. He doesn't seem like a person who doesn't have a ton of suspicion in his heart.
Yeah, he seems like he can suss a lot of stuff out,
In 2008, he came out of retirement to appear on Hulk Hogan's Celebrity Championship Wrestling on country music television, which he also won, which is less surprising.
I mean, who else was on the show?
Glad you asked. Todd Bridges, Trishelle Canatella, Dustin Diamond, Danny Bonaducci, Eric Esch, Aaron Murphy, Frank Stallone, Tiffany, and Nikki Ziering. Eric Esch was a super heavyweight boxer, kickboxer, and martial artist. So the fact that he didn't win is something. Dennis Rodman beat him.
I would have put $1 million on Danny Bonaducci.
Yeah, 100%. I bet Dennis Rodman didn't take his shirt off next to Danny Bonaducci either.
I wouldn't do anything next to Danny Bonaducci.
Yeah, apparently Danny Bonaducci's nickname on the show was Dangerous Danny.
Yeah, no, that's not his nickname on the TV show. That's been his standard nickname since like 1988.
Oh my God, that guy. Do you remember his reality show?
Yeah, man. It was about which one? The one after The Surreal Life? Because he was on The Surreal Life, and then he was on that one where it was just like, I remember him like skateboarding shirtless, holding a handle of vodka, and I was just like, I don't know if I want to watch this.
Yeah, it was fucking brutal.
It seems like nunchucks were involved in that.
Oh, I'm sure.
He also made an appearance on Pros vs. Joes.
Oh, really?
Which was my favorite reality show. I loved that show. And I believe he was shooting free throws while walking on a treadmill.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can't find the name of it, but if you go out to YouTube And just search Dennis Rodman slams into mountain. There's a really great scene. The clip is 26 seconds long. And he was in one of those kind of pros versus Joe's reality show type of things. And he had to like dive off a cliff or something. And he does it successfully. And then when he's in the air, he starts like hooting and hollering and celebrating. And the momentum from him celebrating sends him flying into the side of this mountain. And he knocks himself unconscious while he's dangling from a rope. And that was all on television. And it's pretty phenomenal.
He's on the first episode of Pros vs. Joes, like season 1, episode 1. And here's the write-up of that episode. This was March 6th, 2006 is when it aired. Professional sports legends Dennis Rodman, Jim McMahon, Matt Williams, Bill Goldberg, and Jerry Rice compete head-to-head against average Joes. That show was so fucking good.
That's not a bad lineup.
No, it's fucking amazing. There's one where like one of the challenges was you had to tackle John Rocker off of a pitcher's mound.
John Rocker? Was this pre or post racism John Rocker?
Post. They were like, tackle this motherfucker.
Obviously, his most famous reality television appearance happens in 2009 and 2013. Those are the 2 years Dennis Rodman appeared on Celebrity Apprentice, where he became good friends with Donald Trump, and I think he still is, which that's a bummer.
This is the real heel turn.
It really is.
He's joined a different new world order.
Speaking of a different new world order, this all leads us to the thing we're talking about next and closing out the Rodman season with, which is Dennis Rodman goes to North Korea. What a crazy fucking story this is.
Yeah, this shouldn't be a real thing.
There is, if people want to get a jump on this so you can familiarize yourself with what we're talking about next, there's a documentary called Dennis Rodman's Big Bang in Pyongyang, which is a documentary about Dennis Rodman's trip to North Korea. And, oh man.
Bit of a roller coaster.
It is a difficult watch. Dennis Rodman does not look good in this documentary.
There's debate on whether Dennis Rodman will return from North Korea.
I'm surprised Dennis Rodman was not just held captive at some point. It's a crazy story, and there's updates that go beyond that documentary because it came out in 2015. Dennis Rodman has been back to North Korea several times since. So that's what we're talking about to close out the Dennis Rodman season. Bolo, be on the lookout.
Yeah, he's going to receive a diamond cutter from the People's Republic.
Or deliver one.
Kim Jong-un puts him in a diamond cutter.
You think Kim Jong-un will still be alive by the time that episode goes up?
I mean, I hope not. I hope so. I don't know. Thoughts and prayers.
Until then, that's our episode.
That's a sode, bruh. That's a bro.
That was a good one.
God, that was good. Researching this one was my favorite because it's just like it's such insanity to be able to write about or to read about and watch.
Yeah, just the fact that this happened. I can't picture it happening now. I don't know that the NBA and the WWE have that kind of relationship.
I mean, if not now, when? Oh, 1998? Okay.
Yeah, it'll probably end up like I could see Kawhi Leonard taking Karl Malone's spot because Kawhi Leonard is that same kind of like boring, unassuming dude. And I bet you get him in a wrestling ring and he's just a fucking maniac.
Right. That's exactly what would happen. Oh, man. So yeah, be on the lookout. We got North Korea coming up next. It's going to get us on a list.
Until then, do we have anything to plug?
Well, you can check out Tom and Jeff Watch Batman on Gamefully Unemployed. Me and Tom Ryman drop every Wednesday morning. We drop an episode, and that's really fun. You got this. So thank you for listening to You Don't Even Like Sports, because you don't even like sports.
You don't even like sports.
Sideshow is every other Tuesday through Sideshow Collectibles, and hopefully stand-up comedy becomes legal again soon, so you can check out Mint on Card the second Friday of every month at Blast from the Past in beautiful Burbank, California. Follow us on the social medias.
I don't have anything.
Yeah, you're listening. You subscribe, right?
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting the network. We appreciate it.
You can buy episode 1 of Pros vs. Joes season 1 for $1.99 on Amazon.
Oh, go do that.
Not worth checking out. It is an utterly insane show. And I love it. So it's like just the concept of dudes being like, I could beat that. And then they get like retired athletes that are like, no, you can't.
Yeah. And then watch the North Korea documentary for the exact opposite of that happening. Bunch of retired athletes showing up all cocky and getting their asses handed to them by a bunch of North Korean 3-point shooters. It's fucking amazing.
Fuck yeah. All right.
All right. Until then, let's get the fuck out of here. Jeff, say goodbye.
Nope. I'm not going to do it. Nah,
You just said it, though. I'll edit it back in. Goodbye, everybody. We love you.